Here we are once again at the very sunny and lovely corner of Glenwood and Lunt. We're in the heart of Rogers Park. We're up here on the stage at the Heartland Cafe, and I'm Michael James. I'm your host for this morning's edition of Live from the Heartland, Live from the Heartland Radio. You can also see visuals of Live from the Heartland and hear it if you go to youtube.com/heartlandmedia. It's December 5th in the year 2009. It is one day since 40 years since the assassination of Fred Hampton of the Black Panther Party by the Chicago police force. And we have a former member of the Black Panther Party, Michael McCarty, here, and we have Jeffrey Haas, who is the author of The Assassination of Fred Hampton. Good morning to both of you gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Jeffrey, let me start with you. You just in the nick of time came out with a really wonderful book, The Assassination of Fred Hampton, How the FBI and the Chicago Police Murder a Black Panther. You had a whirlwind tour. You've been traveling around a lot. You were on Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Yesterday, and you've been around the country. Tell us a little bit about writing the book and what it means to you, the response that you're getting.
Well, as the book indicates, I was one of the lawyers for the Hampton and Clark family, and 40 years ago yesterday morning, I was woken by my partner, Skip Andrews, saying Chairman Fred has been killed. And I went to the Wood Street Police Station where I interviewed Deborah Johnson, Fred Hampton's fiancée, and she was 8.5 months pregnant with their child. And she told me about the police raid, how the police had come in firing, how she had been pulled out of the bedroom. 2 police went into the bedroom, and she heard one of them say, "Is he dead yet?" And then she heard 2 shots, and then he's good and dead now. And that was the end of Fred Hampton, a incredibly charismatic, brilliant young man who was the leader of the Panthers, who was only 21 years old. For the next 13 years, my partners at the People's Law Office and I and other attorneys filed a lawsuit to hold those responsible for who murdered Fred Hampton. And what we discovered, it was not only the police and Ed Hanrahan, the prosecutor, who actually executed the raid, but they were set up by the FBI pursuant to a national program targeting the Panthers called COINTELPRO. And the FBI even provided a floor plan to Hanrahan and the police. So my book is about the story of myself growing up in Atlanta. It's got a lot of background information about Fred, his childhood in Maywood, what a brilliant young rising leader he was, and also the story of his death and the legal battle to uncover his killers. And I've been, as you said, I've been on a tour to Chicago, to Atlanta, the West Coast, New York, and the reception has been tremendous, particularly among black young people who have been informed somewhat about the history of Black Power and the Civil Rights Movement, but also with law students and in bookstores. And it's an amazing story, both about this young man and about the acts of the people who killed him. So I've gotten a really good reception.
Jeff, we had you on this show almost a month ago, and I had that morning I had read a chunk of the book, and I did a little more reading this morning. And one of the things that I'd like to ask you about is the response of the young People's Law Office folks, of which you were a member, along with Dennis Cunningham and Skip Andrews and Flint Taylor, a number of other people. You guys, in the book, you actually talk about you not being a traditional law office and kind of taking the offensive around the case. Talk a little bit about the way the press came out, both the Tribune and kind of a front story for Hanrahan, trying to justify it. Brian Boyer did a piece in the Sun-Times, or tried to do a piece, and just there was a lot of mixed reaction from the press. But can you talk a little bit about how your law office took the case on and how you helped to work with the media to get the word out?
Well, as you indicated, the morning of the raid, Hanrahan holds a press conference, and he says the police, who were unsuspecting, were fired upon by the Panthers, and Panthers broke 3 ceasefires and fired a barrage of shots, and including 2 at least from Fred Hampton from the back bedroom. Hanrahan even pointed to a .45 that he said was discovered at the apartment, and that was the weapon that Fred supposedly fired. Well, the Panthers were smart enough to take the community through the apartment, and you could see that 90 bullets came in, and at the most, 1 was fired out. And that came from Mark Clark, who had been shot because it was a vertical shot up in the air. And so the black community reacted against this raid very strongly. Harold Washington, a young state senator, spoke out. Ralph Metcalf did. Jesse Jackson welcomed Bobby Rush. So the tide began to turn, and as we gathered the evidence, we proved that it was not a shootout but a shoot-in. And I think Hanrahan's undoing came when he was so defensive that he called the Tribune in to give them the exclusive, real inside story, supposedly, of the raid. And he gave them a photograph that had 2 black dots on it, and it was from the back door. And he says, this is proof that Fred Hampton fired at the police. Well, we brought the other press out there, and those 2 black dots were nail heads. And I think from then on, Hanrahan was on the defensive, and eventually the charges got dropped, and Hanrahan never got elected to anything again. But it took us a long time, 13 years of litigation, to uncover the federal role in the raid. They hid it. They denied that there was a program, and only because an informant named William O'Neill was disclosed in another lawsuit did we really begin to get traction in our lawsuit and claims against the FBI.
For people who don't know, Hanrahan was kind of the anointed follower of the first Richard Daley, and obviously this case brought him down. But one of the things you mentioned in your book, Jeffrey Haas, was that the Democratic Party at that time spent a lot more time trying to get him reelected to the state's attorney post, which they did, than getting Hubert Humphrey elected to the presidency.
Well, for the Democratic Party, the state's attorney controlled the prosecutions, and of course there was plenty of fraud and corruption, and so if they could control the prosecutor's office, they were pretty much immune from prosecution. So as you said, in 1968, getting Hanrahan elected was more important than getting Humphrey elected. As a matter of fact, as a result of that, Illinois went for Nixon in 1968.
I'd like to turn to Michael McCarty for a minute. Michael, you were, I don't know how old you were when Fred was assassinated. I know you were at St. Ignatius High School. You were an activist there. You've been a guest on the show a number of times. Can you recall for the listeners when you first learned about Fred's assassination and what it meant to you?
I had left that apartment at 2 a.m. We'd had a rally the night before, and many of us came over, and I had fallen asleep on one of the couches. Woke up about 2 a.m. and went home to my parents' home. I got home, laid down, and a little while later I got the call that Fred had been killed. So I called other folks, and we immediately headed over to the apartment. And as Jeff mentioned, one of the first things that we did was word went out, and people were directed in to see what had happened. Because to see, there was a pool of blood from Fred's bedroom out into the kitchen, going almost to the entry into the dining room. And anybody except Hanrahan could see what had happened, that it had been an assassination. And having found out about the fact that later that Fred was still alive. But the other thing that, and it's mentioned in Jeff's book, is that William O'Neill had poisoned Fred the night before. They were so scared of Fred, they essentially killed him twice, because he was going to die from the seconal that O'Neill had put in his Kool-Aid. So a wave of action started and an outreach. It was crushing, because Fred, I was 19, Fred was 21. And if there's ever someone who was an old soul, Fred Hampton was that old soul. Because the dynamism, it's from Fred that I learned about commitment. because his commitment was complete and total. And his commitment to the party, to the principles, and to serving the people. That's what he was about.